All right, so today we are diving deep into one of the most, I think you'd agree, like one of the most just legendary stories in Japanese history, right? We're
Yeah,
talking about the 47 Ronin,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
who doesn't love a good samurai story?
It's captivating.
But this one, it's more than just like a cool action movie plot, right? It's about, well, I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead.
Yeah.
We'll get into it.
We will.
But it's about loyalty.
It
It's
is.
about sacrifice, honor.
Absolutely.
It's about Bushido, the way of the warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got a lot to unpack here, some amazing sources that dive into all of this. And I'm really excited to kind of get into this with you.
Me too.
So I guess to start off, right, for
Yeah.
anyone who might not be completely familiar, like what's the,
The Spark Notes version.
Yeah, look, what's the story here, right?
Okay, so basically you have 47 samurai,
Okay.
and their lord is forced to commit seppuku, which is ritual suicide.
Right, and seppuku, that's, it's a whole thing.
It is, yeah, a whole ritual.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, too.
Yeah, we can definitely touch on that.
But so these 47 samurai, their lord is forced to kill himself.
Right.
And that leaves them as Ronin.
Exactly, Ronin, masterless samurai.
Masterless samurai. So, I mean, what's a samurai without a master?
That's the question, right? What is their purpose then?
Right, and that's where this whole story, this idea of like Bushido, this code,
Yeah,
that's where it really comes in.
absolutely.
So, I mean, why don't we start there? Like, what can you tell us about Bushido? Because I think a lot of people, they hear samurai,
Right.
they think swords, they think fighting.
Exactly.
But it was so much more than that, wasn't it?
It was. It's easy to kind of, romanticize the image of the samurai with their swordsmanship and, the fighting and everything.
Right.
But Bushido was this entire ethical system.
Oh.
It was a philosophy. It was about loyalty.
Yeah.
It was about honor, duty, know.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of like how they lived their whole lives, not just...
Absolutely governing their entire lives.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So, and one of those, like you said, the values was loyalty, right? Chūgi?
Chūgi, exactly.
Okay, yes,
And that was absolutely paramount.
Yeah.
It was the cornerstone of Bushido.
And that kind of explains then, I guess, why these 47 Ronin,
Right.
why they felt like they had to do what they did, right?
Exactly. I mean, their master's honor was their honor.
Okay.
His shame was their shame. And
Right.
so when he was, unjustly forced into this ritual suicide, it was like a stain on all of them.
So it wasn't just about like personal revenge.
No, not at all.
It was about like a much...
It was a moral obligation.
Yeah, like a deeper...
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And so they end up avenging their master, but it doesn't happen right away.
Right, exactly. This is what makes the story even more fascinating.
Yeah?
They waited.
They waited.
Yeah.
2 years.
To enact their plan.
I mean, that seems like a long time, especially when you think about
Especially in that, yeah.
like this, like you're saying, this culture of honor and,
Right, exactly.
like you'd think that, revenge would be swift or whatever.
You would think that, but it speaks to the strategic depth of Bushido as well.
Okay.
They weren't hot-headed.
Right.
They were calculating, patient.
Okay.
Think about it. They were operating under the shogunate
Right.
open rebellion. That was a death sentence.
Right.
So they had to be cunning.
So they were kind of like playing the long game.
They were playing the long game, absolutely. Biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike.
And in those 2 years, I mean, what were they doing? Like, what was...
Well, they had to, first of all, they had to maintain this facade
Okay.
of being, normal, peaceful civilians.
Right, because they couldn't...
They couldn't arouse suspicion.
Right.
So some of them, took up like menial jobs. One of them famously became a sake seller, if you can believe it.
Really?
Yeah. So they really had to disappear into everyday life.
Wow. So they were like really committed to this plan.
Absolutely. They were gathering information. They were, figuring out Kira's routines,
Yeah.
the layout of his mansion. It was all very meticulously planned.
Wow. It's incredible to think about.
It is.
Like the level of detail and the patience.
The patience, absolutely.
And then they, 2 years later, they decide it's time.
Right.
And they launch this raid on Kira's mansion, right?
Yes. In the dead of winter.
Oh, wow.
They stormed the mansion.
I mean, it sounds like something out of,
A movie, right?
Yeah, like a movie.
It was a daring raid. They were outnumbered,
Oh, really?
but they were highly skilled.
Okay.
And they were driven by this, burning sense of duty.
Right, to avenge their master.
Exactly.
So, and they succeeded, right?
They did. They found Kira. and they killed him, avenging their master's death.
So they accomplished their goal?
They did.
But then they
turned themselves in.
Yeah, they surrendered to the authorities.
Knowing full well that they're going to be sentenced to death.
And they do end up committing seppuku, right?
They do. All 47 of them?
I mean, that's a really difficult concept, I think, for a lot of us today to really grasp this idea of ritual suicide.
Right.
But in samurai culture, it was seen very differently.
Very differently. It wasn't seen as, like you said, suicide in the way that we think of it today.
Okay.
It was seen as a way to die with honor.
Okay.
To take responsibility for your actions.
So it was almost like a way to preserve their honor even in death.
Exactly. And in their case, it really solidified their legacy.
Yep.
It showed that Bushido wasn't just about blindly following orders.
Right.
It was about understanding the consequences of your actions.
Right.
And accepting them with grace and dignity.
So even though they were, sentenced to death.
Right.
It was almost like they were choosing.
They were choosing.
To die on their own terms.
Absolutely. To die by their own code.
Wow. And I mean, it's no wonder that this story has become so legendary, right?
Right. I mean, it's been told and retold countless times.
Yeah.
Through plays, books, movies.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows.
The operas, even.
Yeah, operas. I mean,
it's captured the imagination.
Yeah, it's really transcended.
For centuries.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, even in Japan today, there's still a lot of debate.
Absolutely.
About the 47 Ronin, right?
It's still a very much discussed and debated topic.
Yeah.
Some see them as, these paragons of loyalty and Bushido.
Right.
And others say, is this just romanticizing the past?
Right, right.
Was this used as propaganda?
Yeah, that's a good point.
To kind of, enforce obedience?
Right, because if you have a story like that that's so powerful, then...
Exactly. It can be used in many ways. Yeah.
For good or for bad.
And that's, I guess, what makes history so interesting, right?
That's right. It's not just about facts and dates.
Yeah.
It's about interpretation. It's about perspective.
Yeah. And I think it definitely makes me think about, are there any examples of that kind of loyalty today?
That's a good question.
Obviously not
to
that extent necessarily, right? But are there causes or groups or
individuals?
Yeah, individuals who kind of show that same kind of unwavering commitment.
It makes you think, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's something for everyone listening to kind of ponder.
Absolutely.
Because it's a really fascinating question, right?
It is. And it makes you think about, what are we willing to sacrifice?
Right.
What are our values?
Yeah, exactly. And so, as you continue to explore this period of history and this story in particular, it's something to keep in mind, I think.
I agree.
It's a really powerful story with a lot to teach us.
Absolutely. And it's a story that continues to resonate, I think.
Yeah.
Even today.
Yeah, I think so too.
For sure.
So, yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
I think so too.
But we'll definitely have to, maybe revisit this topic.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's just so much more to uncover.
There is.
And so, yeah, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Thank you for having me.
And to everyone listening, keep exploring.
Keep learning.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
For another deep dive.
Into history.
Into history.
Absolutely.
All right, bye.
Bye.